Michael Keating from Keating Media, Shadow Minister. According to defence experts, Australia has a defence policy but is yet to articulate what conflict we're getting ready for. How do you see the conflict that we'll be involved in, and what do you think is a measure of our relative capability?
Well, again, a good question. That's a big question, and I don't think of that in terms of the development of our capability. That it's about imagining a specific conflict, but it is obviously about surveying the global landscape in terms of the kind of threats, I guess, that are faced by us as a nation, but also the kinds of occasions on which our Defence Force might be deployed. If you go to the white paper, what you get is, in essence, a set of three concentric circles. Defence of the continent, an assertion of ourselves in the region, these are my words now, and then being a good global citizen. Fair enough. I wouldn't contend that. I feel a little intellectually unsatisfied that our strategic environment can be described by the most simple Venn diagram that you learn in grade 5, and yet that has been the basis upon which we've had that put in our defence white paper for a long time. It's not that it's wrong, it's fine, but I don't think it goes the whole way in terms of talking about the kind of situations that we find ourselves in. I described earlier about the absolute necessity, I think, for Australia particularly to be taken seriously. We are a middle power. We have lots of choices. We can play big, we can play small, and those choices actually are not obvious. It's not like Luxembourg, which is obviously going to be doing whatever France and Germany is doing. It's not even like the US, which obviously has a very complex environment, but its principal strategy is simple. They seek to be a global power. For us, it is much more complicated. And we live in a part of the world where we're not part of a bloc. We're not like an African country which can take its cue from other members of the African Union, or a European country that can take its cues from members of the European Union. We have to figure this stuff out for ourselves. And that actually defines our circumstances as much as anything. Really does. And what that means in turn is that it's got to be a principal basis upon which we go about our strategic policy, that we must be learners. Like, I've never heard that, but we must be learners. That has to be at the heart of our strategic policy. And you can't be learners unless you are present in the great councils of the world, like the UN Security Council, but present in playing our part in the great crises of the world, such as we have in playing our part in assisting and supporting in the Middle East. So that's really critical to us as well. And all of that is about us being taken seriously. We are not present unless we're taken seriously. And so for me, increasingly, I kind of think that's the dominant idea. And that's what should shape the way in which we think about how we're going to be involved. So yes, we obviously need to have a defence force which can meet the challenge of defending our continent. We obviously need a defence force which can help us project within our region, and we need a defence force that can play our role globally. But I think it's really critical for Australia, and the ADF is an acute expression of the way in which we go about our business in the world, that we play big, and that ought to be part of the way we think about how we develop our capability. And so the Israeli industry is a national asset. It is one born of a national need which is integral to Israel's sense of national mission. The decision for it to exist is deep, involving all sides of politics, the bureaucracy, the IDF, and the defence industry companies themselves. It is an industry which has at its roots strategic policy, but has contributed so much to Israel's broader civil economy. 2 weeks into my current tenure, I had my first meeting as Shadow Defence Minister with the British High Commissioner, Mena Rawlings. Great to see you, Mena. We spoke about the extensive links and cooperation that exists between the Australian Defence Force and the British military. This is a relationship which possibly affords the ADF its best point of reference. Before long, Mena raised with me the tenders being pursued by BAE Systems in relation to the building of Australia's next generation of frigates and armoured fighting vehicles. She told me about the quality of this company, of British technology, and the interoperability that BAE could build between our forces. Mena is a highly capable diplomat, and this was an entirely appropriate and high-quality pitch. Bearing in mind that I had little chance of ever being a decision maker in respect to either of the tenders, I was impressed by the level of thoroughness demonstrated by the British system in putting its best foot forward. Afterwards, I actually wondered whether Australian diplomats have seen it as part of their role to promote Australian defence industry companies in such a proactive way. But perhaps to be fair to Minister Christopher Pyne, he has put our defence attachés to work in promoting Australian exports, and for that he deserves credit. In any event, it was impossible to leave the meeting with Mena without a clear sense that the existence of the British defence industry was a conscious decision and a clear act of deep public policy in Britain. Every facet of government was pursuing it. The conclusion from these experiences and all that I've had since is that the decision to have a national defence industry is not lightly made. If you want to have a national defence industry, then as a nation at every level, we have to commit to it. The visit to Israel left me deeply impressed by what that nation had achieved, but more than a little discombobulated about the state of Australia's endeavours in developing our own defence industry. Yet a starting point was to consider which existing companies in Australia fitted the profile of the defence industry companies that I had witnessed abroad, many of whom have a presence in Australia. Be it Elbit or BAE, or for that matter, Thales in France, Saab in Sweden, or Lockheed Martin in the US, each employ thousands of people, are high-tech in nature, and are heavily export-focused. Are there any Australian companies which fit that bill?